Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 16th of June 2015. Welcome back. Apologies for the slight technical problems there. You are now live with UK Column News. Was that a flip-flop problem, Mike?
Not sure.
We think that was a reboot solution, but we don't know whether it was a flip-flop failing to flip or flop. That's the best we can do in our analysis of the problem today. So thank you for staying with us. We're going to be concentrating in this news on really our rights and why we need to pay attention to what the government is doing at the moment, and of course the importance of Magna Carta. So let's start off with Boris Johnson, remarkable man who has been assuming more and more power. Of course, a man who effectively wants to control London by taking control of the courts, the police and housing. And now he's just the man to be the spokesperson on human rights. So he's been speaking out on LBC, and he's been saying that the government will find it hard to scrap the Human Rights Act. Personally, I don't trust this gentleman further than I could throw him. I think this is a smokescreen. You're going to be talking in more detail in a minute, Mike, but what's your initial thoughts on Mr. Boris Johnson?
I wouldn't like to say in public, Brian, but as far as the Human Rights Act goes, I think that this is not only a smokescreen, it's actually a psychological operation, but we'll come on to that in a second.
Okay, well, let's just have a look at reality in Britain under David Cameron's Conservative government in 2015. Let's have a look at the type of society that Cameron's Conservatives are building. Okay, this is from north of the border, but what's happening in England is certainly happening in Scotland. So this is a report from the Courier. We're going back in time. This was actually a report back from 2014, January, and it said that a US street preacher, Tony Miano, had been arrested in Dundee. He was preaching the word from the Bible, and that was clearly causing well, we don't know who it was causing a problem, but the police arrived and very quickly put an end to his street preaching activities. The Courier also reported this gentleman, a Perth street preacher this time, who was detained in a police cell for more than 5 hours. And he, of course, claimed that he was being stripped of his freedom of speech. We would just say, as the British police state moves in, we're seeing attacks on Christianity and certainly free speech growing. Well, if that was a couple of examples, and just staying north of the border at the moment, we've also got this one from the local newspaper, The Bute Man. Blow for SNP as Bute campaign chair resigns. Now, this is pretty interesting because a gentleman called Alec Mack, the former chairman of the Bute campaign group, they were set up to campaign for a yes vote on Bute in last year's referendum, and he's accused the island's SNP branch of extreme meddling and of being prepared to gag others within the pro-independence movement. So here we see, happens to be SNP, we know it's going on in the Conservative, Labour and Lib Dem camps, gagging anybody who dissents against whatever the main party view is. So free speech going out of the window. And then what's been going on with the police? Well, we've already mentioned this gentleman who died in custody, Sheku Bayo, and great furore because basically the police are not being brought to book over another death. Well, it took Press TV to actually start to highlight this also going on in UK. So another man dies in a Bedfordshire police cell. The police say, without prejudice to the ongoing investigation, from what we know at this time, there's nothing to suggest this tragic death was caused by any police action. And we're keeping an open mind, and we're determined to have a full and transparent investigation so that the causes of the sad loss can be established for the family. The text, apologies for that, I can just bring it up on screen. The text was accurate from the report, so there seems to be a couple of grammatical errors there. But what did Press TV highlight? Well, they picked up the fact that a young man had died at this particular police station before in 2013. But let's look at the figures that they're claiming. quite remarkable. Official figures put the number of deaths in police custody at around 7,630 from
2000.
Yes, that is. There's definitely some small problems with the English in this one, from 2000 to 2013. So over 13 years, if this is to be believed, we're talking about significant numbers of people dying in police custody. This ought to be front page news on every paper in the land. People dying when effectively they're taken under the protection of the police. It's quite remarkable. And of course, let's remember that it's David Cameron's government that's constantly laying into overseas nation states, of which Iran is one of those countries he's targeting. And if you're not convinced by that, then have a look at this Mail report here, which says that a young lady, 22, thought she was going to be raped when 4 male police officers and 1 female police officer stripped her naked in a cell, the whole thing being filmed on the internal CCTV and made available to desk officers. So she's just been awarded I'm going to say, a disgraceful £37,000. She's stripped naked. None of these officers face serious charges, misconduct charges. And what it's really telling us is that Britain's police are now above the law. And let's remember that we've got police policy being set by the National Police Chiefs Council, which is itself of unknown legal status within the Met. So we're virtually a lawless country, Mike, I think.
£37,000 disgraceful because it hasn't got enough zeros. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, she is terrified in a police cell, male officers stripping her naked and clearly showing the video for the fun of for the others in that police station. There should be those people should be in court, and her damages should be, well, significantly increased on 37,000, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
Well, you're about to show a picture of.
I'm about to show a picture. Let's bring the picture up, Nick, because this is a spectacular picture. There are at least several traitors in this picture. I'm sure you can work out who they are. This, of course, was at Runnymede yesterday, where David Cameron made a speech. There he is, making his speech. And what did he say? Well, he pretty much said the same things that he posted in The Sun. And I'm just going to go through this a little bit because, of course, he's talking about human rights, and he has the arrogance and hypocrisy to use the terms human rights and what he intends to do with human rights and Magna Carta all in the same breath. So here's what he said. Britain will not be told what to do in human rights by Euro judges because we invented them 800 years ago. That's basically what he's saying. So he said, straight after the election, I said on the steps of Downing Street that we would govern for working people. These are people who work hard, do the right thing, and deserve a government that backs them all the way. That's why one of the first tasks I set the new Justice Secretary, Michael Gove, was to sort out the complete mess of Britain's human rights laws. I know the frustrations some readers have felt about this. The idea that we can't deport dangerous foreign terror suspects, the criminals who abuse the system with spurious appeal after spurious appeal, that ridiculous European court ruling that said we have to give prisoners the vote. I'm absolutely clear we will scrap the Human Rights Act, and with a new British Bill of Rights we'll restore common sense to our legal system. So he wants to scrap the Human Rights Act, and of course what he's doing is using pretty emotive language in order to justify it. He goes on to say, it's also about restoring the reputation of rights. Labour's Human Rights Act had some of the decisions the Strasbourg court have given human rights a bad name. That's a real shame. After all, it is this country that invented the whole idea of rights 800 years ago. That's not true. On this day, something extraordinary happened on the banks of the Thames. So let's clarify that slightly. 800 years ago, Magna Carta was sealed by King John, which of course reasserted previously existing rights. So they're not 800 years old. They're actually a couple of thousand years old. These rights existed, and our entire constitution and the Magna Carta, let's make this point absolutely clear, is based on the principle that we have unlimited, God-given, inalienable rights. We don't need them written down for us. Now, My rights, of course, are unlimited up until the point where they infringe on your rights, and this is the key point of the British Constitution. So do no harm is a fundamental principle here. But the bottom line is that human rights is based on the principle that you start with a blank page. You have no rights. This is not the British way of doing things. It's not the American way of doing things, which is based on the British way of doing things. So this is why human rights are so dangerous. Now, in principle, I support the idea that Cameron wants to get rid of the Human Rights Act, and I'll explain a bit more about why that is in a second. But I do not support what he intends to replace it with, which is a British Bill of Rights. So he intends to wipe the slate clean, start with a new blank piece of paper, and decide what your rights are and what my rights are. What gives him this right to decide that what our rights are? He doesn't have it. So this is why, by the way, and the people within this office have different spiritual points of view. But this is why, in my opinion, it is extremely dangerous that the principle of God, no matter what God you believe in, whether you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever it is, if you remove the principle of God from government, from the judiciary, you're in a very serious position, in my opinion, because you're removing the idea that there is a higher power, and therefore anybody like David Cameron here can decide to be that higher power, and this is the danger of it. So anyway, just bring that up again, Nick, a second, and we'll go on through this a little bit. He says, after all, it was this country that invented the whole idea of rights 800 years ago. And he went on to say, the king had been behaving like a bully. Well, you would know, King David. The king had been behaving like a bully, and there was no way for the people to rein him in. So some of his barons sat him down and gave him a document to seal. I think that needs to happen again. It set out the limitations of the monarchy and the basic rights of the people. It said that no one would again be above the law, not even the king. And yet, Mr. Cameron, you seem to believe that you are above the law. You don't mention that in this speech or in this article. This was the first time that these principles had ever been written down. It was called Magna Carta, and it went on to change the world. And everyone in this country should be proud of that. Well, that's true. And then he went on to say the sort of rights that flow from it, the right to life, the right not to be tortured.
Oh.
Sorry, I had to stop there because I just had a double take. The right not to be tortured. Yeah, Mr. Cameron. The
rendition is the word, Mr. Cameron.
Hypocrisy is the right to a fair trial. Melanie Shaw. Yes, these have helped Britain succeed over centuries. Unfortunately, David Cameron seems to have forgotten that fact, and he seems to have gone a completely different direction.
Sorry to interject. I don't think Mr. Cameron's forgotten. I think he is simply lying to the British public because he knows what he is saying is untrue. So this is a deliberate lie.
Yes. He goes on to say, if we just bring that up again, he goes on to say, human rights are not a gift to be bestowed upon us by monarchs, barons or politicians. So why are you trying to do it, Dave? Today marks the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, so quite rightly there's a lot to focus on with this lofty old document. So he's now turned it on its head. It's now a lofty old document. He's trying to discredit it, actually, and what it means for modern day human rights. And so he goes on, and he I'm pretty incredulous about the whole thing, really. And
it's such a massive operation, isn't it? Yes. They have completely taken over the celebration of 800 years of Magna Carta, and they are using it to push through this very devious political agenda, which says it's about protecting us, but actually it's doing the opposite. It's stripping rights from us.
Absolutely. Now, so I want to bring this up now. This is Amnesty International. Of course, they are also slagging off David Cameron's speech from yesterday and that article in The Sun. But of course, they unfortunately missed the point completely because they are saying that we really need to cling on to the European Human Rights Act. So they're missing the point about human rights, about the blank page, about the fact that there's nothing there unless it's bestowed upon us by somebody who thinks, some dictator somewhere that thinks that they have the right to decide what we have and what we haven't. So Amnesty International absolutely pushing for the Human Rights Act and for the European system of human rights. And I would say to Amnesty International, you need to look at the principles that underpin the British Constitution, the principles of God-given unlimited inalienable rights, and perhaps we should be defending those instead. And let's just remember that Magna Carta has never failed to win a case when it's been invoked correctly in a court. And so that is a fairly good precedent. And we also have to remember the fact that Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights, as I said in my article yesterday, these were peace treaties, and they were reasserting already established rights. So they were not new rights being given. This is how it's being presented in the media, that these documents gave us new rights. They did not. They reasserted the rights that already existed, and they were there to rein in, as Cameron said, an out-of-control monarch. Well, we got rid of, the point we've made many times, we got rid of the divine right of kings, and we didn't do it for the purpose of ending up with the divine right of Parliament. David Cameron is not above the law. No one is. The Queen is not above the law, and we need the rule of law back and a reassertion.
Pretty fast, actually. Pretty fast.
Yeah. So.
Well, what happens when people actually stand up and do the right thing with regard to essential rights, and they use the law properly to do it? Some quite remarkable things can happen. So thank you very much to our overseas viewer who highlighted this video clip, which is of an Asian gentleman protecting the homeless. But very, very interesting couple of minutes, which we'll just play for you.
They're asking him to move, as you can see. There's a big confrontation here in Evington Road. Poor guy's been here for quite a while now and he's struggling. Officers, how's it alright, officers?
Yeah, good, thanks, sir. How are you?
I'm alright. What are you troubling this chap for here?
It's harassing homeless.
We're from.
I can now get takeaway food from there. I thought the council got
listen.
one night on the streets.
If
you sound not welcoming when they're giving me free Chinese food from across the road.
We're giving him food. He is welcome here. He is welcome. Who's made the complaint?
The council
but what you got to remember is you're not police.
Asking a question.
I'm asking you a question. You're not a police officer. You're a civil servant. Yeah.
I understand that.
All right. I'm going to answer your question. Leave this man alone because you're harassing him. You're in his personal space. Problem. Go phone a police officer now. Phone a police officer. But you're not a police officer because you step away from his private space, please, and leave him alone and stop harassing him.
We're not harassing him.
Yeah, you are harassing him. Do you feel harassed?
Yeah.
Do you feel threatened, sir?
Yeah, I can't go nowhere,
Do you feel threatened, sir? Tell me on camera, do you feel
I come away
threatened?
from the city centre because they kept on harassing me. I come here, I get welcomed by the community, and then now these people have turned up again to harass me some
Do you
more.
feel threatened, sir?
Yeah, because...
He feels threatened. Can you step away from him, please? Or I'll have to do a civil arrest on you.
Okay.
Can you step back from his personal space, please?
Nowhere, you know what I mean? What am I supposed to do? Jump off the
Can you
cliff?
step back from his
follow me off the
personal
cliff?
space, please? People are watching. This is my community, right? Can you step back from his personal space? You're harassing him. He feels threatened at the moment. Can you move back, please, officers?
Do you feel threatened, sir?
Do you feel threatened, sir?
Why do you feel threatened?
None of your medium is 6861. And this chap here, he's alright. This one's not said nothing. He's been understandable and I appreciate that. This one's been a bit funny. He's not stepping back away from this guy.
I'll move back.
Thank you very much. Can you step back, sir? Can you step back on the same day? That's it. Threatened. He said he feels threatened and I take his word for it.
Yes.
Yeah? Now, if you have any issues with him, you can arrest him or you can phone the police. Has he committed a crime?
No,
I ask you a question. Has he committed a crime?
What we want to see,
I'm
we want
asking
to
you a
see-
question,
Yeah,
officer.
and I'm answering.
Has he? Yes or no? Has
No,
he
he's
committed a
not.
crime? Okay, then
And
please
what
step
we're
back.
trying to do-
Please. My friend, they're going to leave you alone now. I'm going to have a word with them, yeah? Anything you want to say to the viewers? Because this is going straight online.
No, just sort these people out because they're supposed to be helping the community out, but they're just harassing the homeless.
No problem. I'm
No,
going to
that's
have
not what they were put in place for.
I'm going to have a private word. Listen, remember, they're not police officers. They can't do nothing
No,
to
but they
you.
were supposed to help the community. How's this helping the community?
Don't worry. Let me have a quick chat with them. You stay safe, my friend, yeah?
Just thanks for your help.
Any food? You want any food?
Not yet.
Let me
I've had an
know
odd
what you
sandwich,
do.
but-
In the next 2 hours, I'm going to bring you some food, right? Some
Right.
hot curry and that with some naan, right? Is that restaurant there, Aisha's restaurant? That's my family place, so I'll get you some food from there, yeah?
Right.
Stay blessed.
Well, that was a remarkable video clip, and it really teaches us some fairly fundamental things, that when you know the law, you can make a difference. You can make a difference by being polite and non-violent. Very interesting to see that young community police officer stepping back when he said, move back away. And of course, the decision as to whether he felt threatened or harassed or not was the decision of the homeless gentleman. So he said he did feel intimidated, and that is the end of the matter. So the videoing of it, evidence, but knowing the law and putting it over in a polite, forceful way, very powerful. And the other bit for us is that we are delighted to see people from different communities now standing up to act for what is right, and of course protecting people who are vulnerable. If I could sort of anticipate what one of those young community constables was going to say at the beginning, he was about to say, "We're here because of the council." That's what I think he was about to say. And so here we've got another example of powers being given to local authorities which they have no right to hold. Local councils acting beyond authority, which of course is the agenda of political charity common purpose. So great to see that happening. What we need is millions of people coming back to what the law really requires and defending the weak and vulnerable. Well, if you're interested in doing more, perhaps you consider taking up a subscription with the UK column. And if you join us, of course, one of the things you can do is get on board the website and start running your own blog. So we've just got a little screenshot of the sort of thing you'll see here. And material is now starting to come in, and there's some excellent blogs already posted. Anything you can add on that, Mike, of things for people to do or not do when they come in?
No, the other thing I just wanted to mention is that Martin Edwards, who has kindly posted those 3 initial blogs to get us all started, has set up a Writers' Circle group. So anybody that wants help or assistance or advice, please jump onto that and ask for an invitation. He will do his best to help.
Right, excellent. Well, staying on the theme of police brutality and effectively the corruption in Britain's law system and the courts, let's have a recap of what we covered yesterday, which was the brutalisation of child abuse victim Melanie Shaw. So we'll just remind people of what we were looking at, and that was a whole cycle of events which were clearly designed to put this woman under some pretty vicious pressure and harassment, and ultimately this has now put her in a very difficult position indeed. So let's remind ourselves, Melanie first blew the whistle on her own abuse and that of other Beechwood children in 2011. She was told on the streets that she would lose her child if she continued to cause waves about the abuse. She refused to be silenced, and surprise, surprise, in due course, Nottingham Social Services took her son. She was then accused and convicted of arson and criminal damage. People who attended the court said that the evidence against her was pretty flimsy, but Alison Saunders of the Crown Prosecution Service ensured that those charges were forced through. She was then held for months in HM Prison Peterborough, where she was bullied and neglected. Her medical needs were not met. Ultimately, she was sentenced to a community supervision order to be conducted by the probation service. But during that time, she received absolutely no mental health care in the community. She was then harassed and bullied by Nottingham police, including them breaking into her home until it clearly affected her state of mind. And then the next minute, we've got more charges, we're going to say, being cooked up. She was charged and found guilty of false imprisonment of a paramedic in a secret court. Remember, this is Britain 2015 under Prime Minister David Cameron. She's held on remand in Peterborough again, where she has been in solitary confinement, segregation since February this year. Then the Nottingham Police Commissioner misled the public by saying that she'd actually been released and the charges dropped, but we understand he was either deliberately misled himself or poorly briefed by Nottingham Police. But now there's an attempt to evict Melanie from her home as benefits have not been paid, and she is still absolutely entitled to those benefits. So if we're on the subject of Britain's police, this lady must be, we think, brought to account. It's Superintendent Helen Chamberlain. She has got responsibility for protecting the public and certainly protecting Melanie Shaw in Nottingham, and it would appear that her professional performance has not been what the public might expect. So Melanie is very much in our minds. We wonder whether Melanie is in the mind of Superintendent Helen Chamberlain. And of course, let's remember the Chief Constable Chris Eyre, because presumably it would have been one of his staff that gave the mistaken brief to the Police and Crime Commissioner Paddy Tipping. So was it this lady who was part of the brief to Paddy Tipping? We don't know, but we're waiting for further information on that. So let's have a look in more detail now at how the state has attacked Melanie. And this is really to bring people up to date with what's been going on. So, of course, here he is, Paddy Tipping. He hasn't actually been able to assist Melanie. He can report, he can talk about it, but he said he can't get involved in an operational police mission. Well, Melanie's had absolutely no help from Nottinghamshire Healthcare Mental Health Services. They are supposed to provide care in the community. This has clearly not happened in her case. Let's have a look at their team. Here it is, positive with a big tick in the box. So you can read on that website why they think they're so important. Did they provide the services the public's paying for? No, they did not. Well, Helen Chamberlain, of course, we've discussed her. She's clearly there in the picture somewhere. And if we have a look at the council themselves, well, they're more interested in reporting outdoor theatre season than they are in dealing with the abuse of Melanie Shaw. And Nottingham City Council is the council we're talking about, because we understand that Nottinghamshire County Council has now started to pay attention and talk to some of the child abuse survivors group. So if we put it together in a slightly different way, here's the council again. They're at the heart of what's happening. Now, we were told a little while ago there was going to be another court case to, evict Melanie Shaw from her house. We understood this was going to be run through Nottingham City Homes, but we now know that it's actually being progressed through Nottingham City Council, and there is a court hearing on the 2nd of July, which is a directions hearing, but the intent of Nottingham City Council is to evict Melanie. Well, of course, Children's Social Services also have done their work. And what's been achieved? Well, Melanie's lost her child, and now Nottingham City Council is looking to take her home. It is amazing, isn't it, Mike? When you break it down like this, we're supposed to be living in a democracy, protecting the weak and vulnerable. They want this woman silenced. There can only be one reason, that her testimony of the abuse, and as she states, the murder of children and the implication of senior establishment figures, is so distressing to the political system, they simply want her silenced.
There's no humanity in this at all.
There's no humanity. In fact, as you watch it unfold, it is unbelievably cruel. So let's continue. This is really the update. So Nottingham City Council has a court case listed for the 2nd of July, 2 days, and that is to take possession of Melanie Shaw's house. Nottingham City Council served documents on Melanie while she was already being held in HM Prison Peterborough. Melanie was called to court, but no surprises, she didn't have any representation again, and she wasn't able to bring in the lay legal advisor that she wanted to use. And we understand that people in the court said that Melanie seemed very confused.
So let's just remind ourselves, she has been in solitary confinement since February, with the exception of 3 days.
Yeah.
She's had very little contact with anybody outside the prison. And she's brought into court probably having had no briefing as to the reason that she's been there, and people are surprised that she's confused.
Indeed, yeah.
Right.
And so this is victimisation of a child abuse victim. This is deeply cynical behaviour by the British system. Let's continue on through. Now, we understand that it is alleged that the reason for repossession of her house is an allegation of setting a neighbour's house alight and criminal damage. Well, this is bizarre, because this is a reference to the crime she was charged and found guilty for, but apparently it's now become an allegation. But this is of great interest. It's also alleged that Nottingham City Council is citing 17 allegations of antisocial behaviour earlier this year. Now, remember, of course, as we've just shown, that Melanie should have had mental health care in the community, but Nottingham City Council simply withdrew that from Melanie. So this lady has had some pretty serious issues. Post-traumatic stress, obviously greatly increased by the brutal action of Nottinghamshire police.
How many homes are they taking from the people that abused Melanie in the first place?
I don't know, but I take your point, Mike, probably none. If we just add that last box in, Nick, it's top right-hand corner, we've just brought it in. So we're saying that Nottingham City Council appears confused as to the role of its social inclusion unit in helping Melanie. What that really means is they did not help her. And if we complete the circle, what has gone on here is total victimisation of a victim. This is calculated, it is deliberate, it involves conspiracy across a variety of public authorities. This is dangerous and dirty stuff to silence a child abuse whistleblower. We need that Magna Carta brought back into power.
Indeed. Okay, financial stuff then. Here we go. There he is with his hair transplant and all. It's brilliant. So today we see further evidence of an economic plan that is working with a powerful mix of low prices and rising wages, which are continuing to grow well above inflation. This is good news for working people and family budgets and shows the economic recovery is going from strength to strength. Of course, the job is not done, and we will continue to remain vigilant to all the risks, particularly with the global economic situation. When the global economic situation is so uncertain. So there you go. That's all we need to say about that. Inflation has gone back above 0 to 0.1%. It's brilliant news. We cannot have a better economic outlook, and I'm looking forward to the next 5 years because I know we're all going to do so well.
It's a shame that the Asian guy didn't ask the homeless man sitting on the street how he was finding George Osborne's economic policy. But really, what we've got to say about this is the politicians have even given up the pretense of speaking the truth. They're simply now lies and propaganda to the public, and they're expecting us to swallow it.
Yeah.
His nose is growing considerably, I think, Mr. Osborne.
Yes. And finally, this is a pretty spectacular article here. This is Glenn Greenwald really slagging off the Times in the most impressive way. It's around this story about the Snowden files and the allegation that the Russians and the Chinese have cracked the encryption on the remaining Snowden files, which has put various British spies at risk, and that Britain is having to evacuate its spies from Russia and China. And of course, some people may say that what happens before you're about to go to war, Brian?
Well, people are saying that.
Right, okay.
I will say that I am being told by people who I believe are in a very knowledgeable position that they are extremely worried by what they're seeing happen at the moment, which is the withdrawal of spies and the fact that we've got David Cameron and this very dangerous British government ramping up hostility on Russia's border while they cut our defence forces to the bone. This is treason in front of us. Right.
So Greenwald, they're criticising the Times for what the Times is reporting, and the question I would ask is, why has the Times reported it? My suggestion here, and it's only speculation, I can't know this, is that they are withdrawing spies from Russia and from China, and they have to create a cover story for that. So let's go back to what Greenwald has to say here. Because it's quite spectacular. He says, Western journalists claim that the big lesson they learned from their key role in selling the Iraq war to the public is that it's hideous, corrupt and often dangerous journalism to give anonymity to government officials, to let them propagandize the public, then uncritically accept those anonymously voiced claims as truth. But they've learned no such lesson. That tactic continues to be the staple of how major US and British media outlets report, especially in the national security area. And journalists who read such reports continue to treat self-serving decrees by unnamed, unseen officials laundered through their media as gospel, no matter how dubious are the claims and factually false is the reporting. Now, of course, we have come across this quite a lot recently, Brian, where we've actually challenged various journalists and various subjects. Where did you get your information? And they would refuse to name the sources. And of course, you're expected to just accept that if they say they know the source, that is a credible source. And Greenwald really goes on to criticise. I strongly recommend people read this because it is fantastic. He absolutely criticises the Times for uncritically pushing forward this story without any kind of comment on who the sources are or the credibility of those sources. Yeah.
So we're going to say dangerous times for Britain. Can we do something about it? Of course we can. What do we need? We need a very large number of people to start standing up to be counted. And of course, exposing what is really happening, exposing the lies and threats of British politicians. We'll leave it there. You might hear a dog barking in the background, and you're absolutely right. Thanks very much for joining us. We will be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.